Hi, I'm Mickey Delmage of Sherwood Park, Alberta. Hear the latest information from the world of radio, locally and internationally, each week on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and online at ckut.ca.
Welcome, everybody, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, December the 10th, 2023, just a couple weeks away from the Christmas holidays. My name's Sheldon. I'm with Jill. It is our weekly visit with you, 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio here on CKUT Radio 90.3 FM in Montreal. You can reach us by email, radioreport@yahoo.com. The show is live streaming and archived at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group, always very active. We have a few new members this week. We're at 946. We welcome Ratan in Medinipur, India, Bo in Krogan, New York, and Frank in Paris, France. That's why the show is called International Radio Report. International listeners around the world. We thank you all for joining. You can find us on Facebook. Just look for International Radio Report. Our YouTube channel has 910 subscribers. You can find the most current show there, as well as previous shows that you can listen to at your convenience. And our X account is at IRRCKUT. Just 36 followers there. You can follow us there if you like. So we'll get down to the business this week, which involves some stories from here in Canada, the United States, and a few things from elsewhere out there in the world, particularly in the BBC world in the UK. First off, though, the big story making the rounds here in Canada is some rather dramatic cuts coming to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, both the English side and the Radio-Canada side here in Montreal and with satellite offices across the country. Major cuts are coming, all due to budget restraints from what they're saying. It looks, though, a lot of people have been concerned, well, you know, what's going to happen to radio? Is radio going to be affected by this? All the reports that I've seen seem to be focusing on television, both on the English and French side. A number of layoffs, a number of vacant job positions which are being eliminated, and I'm sure there'll probably be some retirement packages offered to some longtime employees of the organization. The union, most people at CBC are unionized. The unions are not happy about this coming. This is almost like Bell. This is going to be happening right around the Christmas holidays. Like, here's your gift. Don't come back. That sort of thing. I know the Radio-Canada side is a little upset here in Montreal. They feel that they shouldn't be hit as hard as the rest of the country is, that they don't, it should not be like a 50-50 split. We don't really know what the exact details are going to be yet. Nothing, as I said, that we've read is really talking about radio, though.
One of the things that, hits you when you look at the CBC, I understand how, all of this media and television and having people everywhere to handle, all the latest news and the programming, it costs a lot of money, but they do get $1 billion plus of money. And you kind of wonder, is there maybe at the CBC some place for cuts that should be done because maybe there's too many people doing jobs that could be put together in one office instead of several. And definitely one thing for sure, it's the future is more scary than what's happening right now because we're hearing possible change in government eventually, and that new government is looking at very drastic cuts to Radio-Canada and the CBC in general. But yeah, definitely radio doesn't seem to be affected for what we actually talk about here. I was looking at the French side ratings here, and they were saying that the CBC French Francophone here in Quebec is actually doing extremely well. So, there would be no reason for cuts there. I mean, I think it's doing a great job at what it should do.
the CBC radio stations across Canada, Radio 1, the Channel 1 stations do very well in most cities. The second channel, the music channel, not so well in most cities. Then they have the online services now as well. So there's lots of different ways to access CBC radio. Radio is certainly less costly than television is. So we know right there that, the savings are probably going to come from cuts in television. They're talking about reduced programming. Advertising isn't really, we were discussing that before the show. Should an organization that gets over $1 billion Canadian taxpayer dollars to finance themselves then be able to turn around and go out and sell advertising time? Do they need to? I don't know. It really needs to. We hear of government waste all the time, and how much waste is there going on within CBC? We don't really know. We assume that there probably is some. So we'll see what the cuts turn out to be exactly. We hope that I've seen a lot of letters to editors and things like that saying, do what you want to television, but don't touch the radio. So there seems to be an affection and a desire to hold on to what we have radio-wise from the public broadcaster. Television, maybe not so much. The one big thing that people are really squawking about, though, is that the head of the CBC has said that they're still going to be issuing the executive bonuses to people.
Yep.
How can you be doing that when you're cutting a whole bunch of other people? That's pretty bad.
Yep.
So anyways, more to come on that story.
So we have a letter for a continuing story about pirate radio. The letter is "Not all pirate radio sweeps are created equal." And this is by Bennett Cobb, a letter to Radioworld. In this letter to the editor, the author comments on Randy Stine's recent article, "FCC Finds Collecting Pirate Radio Fines a Challenge." Your November 24, 2023 article, "FCC Finds Collecting Pirate Radio Fines a Challenge," is excellent and necessary reporting. It should be expanded to cover all FCC fines. How many FCC fines are collected or never collected? Does Congress take no interest in this question? Are uncollected fines in the millions or billions? Without transparency, the public can't evaluate FCC enforcement. Your article also states pirate radio is an unauthorized transmission of radio signals on the frequencies in or adjacent to FM and AM radio bands. That is not strictly correct. In the words of the Preventing Illegal Radio Abuse Through Enforcement Act, the Pirate Act, the FCC relies on this act for its authority to perform sweeps of pirate stations and impose the heavy penalties it is announcing. You accurately quoted an FCC news release. What the Commission wishes to say and what the law actually says are different. Congress took up the issue of exactly what defines pirate radio. At 47 U.S.C. 511H, the Pirate Act specifically limits pirate radio to spectrum frequencies between 535 and 1705 kilohertz, inclusive, or 87.7 and 108 megahertz inclusive. Frequencies adjacent to those bands are excluded from the scope of this law. Unlicensed broadcast stations are prevalent in the high-frequency spectrum, especially between 5 and 10 megahertz. Not a single sweep, interdiction, or fine has occurred with these stations under the Pirate Act authority. At this writing, the FCC database, Pirate Radio Enforcement Actions by State, contains 64 records of enforcement actions against pirates since January 2020. None of these involved the HF bands or the 535 to 1705 kilohertz band either. Are unlicensed HF broadcasts legal? No, but Congress made clear where in the spectrum it wants the FCC to focus its attention. So this is a letter by Bennett Cobb of Arlington, Virginia. Definitely there is a focus. It's obvious. I think the focus goes where, I'll say it the way I'm thinking about it, is the focus goes where the money is. That is where big broadcasters with their FM signal can be interfered with, and they have millions of dollars, and they are the first ones that complain all the time that maybe some pirate is next to their frequency, interfering with them. it's really the big gun broadcasters that have a lot of money where the focus is. So it's not the same appeal. It's like, HF, most people probably don't even know that there's pirates on HF shortwave.
Yeah, I think the difference too is that the HF pirates are periodic. They're on, maybe on a weekend for an hour or half-hour broadcast, and then they disappear, and you may not hear them again for months until the next holiday comes up or what have you. These FM pirates that they're chasing are on the air like a regular licensed radio station. They're just broadcasting continuously. They could be interfering not only with other FM stations, but sometimes their equipment might create harmonics or spurs into other service bands. The air band, which is not that far away, for example, could be affected, and other public service bands. So I think that's really where their focus is. I think it's not realistic to threaten them with these millions of dollars of fines. They're not going to get that kind of money from these people. It's pretty obvious. We've talked before that the solution is confiscation of equipment, get them off the air. If they try to come back, well, then you follow up on it again. But I think if you do that, maybe give them some small monetary fine and take the equipment, then the chances of them coming back are going to be much slimmer. $2-3 million fines. It's a waste of time as far as I'm concerned.
I think the focus is in the wrong place. The focus is, let's give them $1 million fines, and probably with a thinking of it pays back some of the money that are given to us to actually enforce the law. That's not how it should be. Actually, there should be some transparency of the FCC, what they're doing. But it should be, what happened? Are they off the air for good? Then we did our job. We stopped the pirate, and that's it.
Interesting letter. And certainly, I'm sure there's somewhere out there listening to us are some HF pirate operators saying, well, thank goodness they're not bothering us.
Yeah.
We don't want a $2 million fine.
It's a little more difficult to find an HF pirate. It's not like an FM signal that's always on the top of the same building every day.
That's true. It's radio nerd people like us that knows when to go looking for these stations and what bands they operate on and on all that. So it's not your everyday listening habit of the average everyday listener. Next story, we have an update on the attempt to make AM radio compulsory in the new vehicles. The attempt to pass the AM for Every Vehicle Act in Senate has fallen short. From Randy Stine at Radioworld. A maneuver by Senate sponsors of the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act to pass the bill by avoiding a vote of the full Senate this week has fallen short. The push to use unanimous consent to pass the bill was led by Senators Ted Cruz, Edward Markey, and Ben Ray Lujan. However, a Republican from Kentucky objected to its passage, mandating that all cars have AM radio is contrary to any notion of limited government, Senator Paul on the floor of the U.S. Senate said on Tuesday. Paul said there is irony in seeing Republicans come to the floor to pass bills that place mandates upon American businesses, therefore picking winners and losers. The House version of the bill remains pending in committee for now, according to the National Association of Broadcasters. Cruz took to the Senate floor on Tuesday and asked senators to join him in support of free speech and in support of AM radio. It is widely enjoyed by Americans across the country. Over 80 million Americans listen to AM radio every month. They rely on it, he said. The Texas Republican continued, I believe these automakers stood up to remove AM radio as part of a broader pattern we see of censoring views that are disfavored by big business. I think this is consistent with what big tech has done, silencing views they disagree with. So this bill is all about preserving consumer choice and letting consumers decide. If you don't want to listen to AM, turn it off. However, Senator Paul said he disagrees with the premise of Cruz's argument on the matter of free speech. The debate over free speech as listed in the First Amendment is that government shall pass no laws, said Paul. It has nothing to do with forcing your manufacturer to have AM radio. This legislation attempts to insert Congress's judgment into a question best decided by American consumers. Paul took things a step further on Tuesday evening by introducing an amendment to the AM for Every Vehicle Act to strip electric vehicle tax credits. The amendment was not voted on. The National Association of Broadcasters said in a statement it appreciates the senators' efforts to pass the bill. NAB applauds Senators Cruz, Markey, and Lujan for going to the floor of the U.S. Senate today to seek final passage of the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act, again demonstrating their leadership and steadfast commitment to advancing this critical legislation. So I guess the auto manufacturers are sitting by quietly, just waiting to see how this whole thing plays out. Right now, what looked like it was going to steamroll through has now been thrown a curve. So we're just going to have to wait and see where this goes, if it gets pushed harder and does get put into practice, or whether it just gets dropped.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's, a lot of personal political views versus what actually is good for everyone. They say, the question is best decided by American consumers. The American consumers, like many countries, even here in Canada, sometimes needs to be voiced through something a lot bigger, which is the government. So what's happening with our sun? Well, the sun is still active this week. There was quite a lot of activity with some of the flares that happened, and some coronal mass ejections that didn't actually come from flares, but just solar filaments that kind of snapped. So from time to time, you'd have some solar blackout of the shortwave spectrum, and that would come back. But things are kind of quieting down as we're recording this, and things might actually be a little better. Although the activity slowed down, conditions should still be good unless some new activity shows up with some bigger sunspots or new sunspots. Sunspot number 121, the solar flux is 135, and there's no significant coronal holes. So maybe we're heading for a quieter but good condition week. So we'll see if all of this comes through. The only way that you really know how propagation is going to be is to turn on a radio and listen.
This is Christian Breton of Quebec City, Quebec. You're listening to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
In our next story, we have the BBC that overhauls American website amid broader overseas push. This is by Sara Fischer of Axios. So the BBC on Tuesday relaunched its North American website as part of a broader push to grow its business and audiences in the US and abroad. BBC Studios CEO of Global Distribution says, "Why it matters, the move comes as the storied public broadcaster faces increased pressure from UK regulators over public funding. The country's Prime Minister on Sunday said a proposed £500 million cut to the BBC's budget are welcome. As part of a broader investment in U.S. content, the studio's team plans to expand its production business in the U.S. The refreshed site will be available first in North America and will debut in other regions outside of the UK in early 2024. A new native mobile app for Android and iPhone will debut outside of the UK in early 2024. Once again, a lot of that being with the push to online services by the BBC. Yes, it's fine when it works. Like we always say, it could be very interesting to have all of this, but there's still need to talk about radio and the focus on radio. It's going to be very important.
The encouraging thing is looking to do more in the United States. We certainly know from the shortwave services that they've pretty much given up on the North American shortwave audience. They really, focused their attention on third world broadcasts. But this will be their attempt, I guess, to get inside the United States into a market where they figure the online access is going to be much more accessible.
Oh, yeah.
And so put more focus there and probably get more bang for the buck by doing it that way. Something else, though, that will impact the BBC is our next story from the Press Association entertainment reporter Naomi Clarke. BBC license fee to rise by more than £10 next year. The BBC license fee will rise by just over £10 next year as the government reduces the planned increase due to the pressure of the cost of living, according to reports. For the past 2 years, the license fee has been frozen at £159, but it was previously agreed it would rise in line with inflation after April 2024, which would see it increase by 9% or £15 to £173.30. The Sun newspaper reports that ministers have pressed the corporation to settle in line with September's consumer price index rate of inflation of 6.7, which would instead bring it up by £10.65 to £169.65 per year. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser is expected to make an announcement on the license fee in Commons on Thursday. Earlier this week on BBC Radio's 4's Today program, Ms. Fraser insisted ministers were looking at the planned rise amid concerns over the cost of living. The lower fee increase will come as a blow to the BBC, which is seeking to make £500 million of saving in the face of high inflation and the 2-year freeze on the fee, which provides most of its funding. The corporation expects a raft of changes to save the news division £7.5 million. Other cost-cutting measures, including moving a number of World Service TV and radio broadcast services online and merging the domestic and global news channels. It all comes down to money.
Yep.
It really is what it's all about.
This is the biggest problem with everything that is a news outlet, always talking about money. I'm sure, like many big services, there are places you can cut and make some savings, but it has to be done in a way to make sure that it doesn't impact the output, the news that we get, the information we get out of it. It's very, very delicate because these are important broadcasters. And, we talk about the CBC here cutting money, some budget here, and the BBC, and it looks like everybody's kind of having a hard time finding the funding required for all of this to happen. So let's just hope that it doesn't go too far and impact the actual services we get out of them, which are extremely important. In our next news item, we have over the air is still listeners' overwhelming choice for radio. This is via Radio Inc. As FMR Associates and Eastland Ratings prepare to release their full 2023 National Radio Listening Survey, they're giving further insight into how traditional AM/FM radio maintains its power and reach in the marketplace. For those still wondering who listens to the radio over the air, the answer is the majority. According to the data, 69% of total radio listening occurs on traditional over-the-air radio, with the figure slightly higher at 71% in smaller markets. So in large markets, which is the top 30 markets, report 66% of listening through AM/FM. This is likely due to commuters and more public transportation options in larger cities. Streaming audio accounts for 13% of listening nationally, consistent across both large markets and smaller ones. Usage of phone apps for radio listening stands at 10% overall, but is slightly higher in the top 30 markets at 13%. The survey also indicated that 8% of respondents were unsure or said it depends when asked about their primary method for listening to their favorite local radio stations, with 9% in larger markets and 7% in smaller markets reflecting this uncertainty. This matches with results dropped last week, revealing that weekly AM/FM listening in 2023 among adults aged 25 to 64 remained steady from 2022 rates at 86%. The survey conducted from March to October 2023 involved 1,500 adults aged 25 to 64. Full results will be made available on December 15th. So lots of people listen to the radio. Lots of people listen to the radio over the air. And we can see that even though some people do use apps and streaming, it's still not something that's very dominant in listening to radio in general.
I think the easiest thing to do is turn on the radio.
Yes.
It's always there. It's instant. You're not fooling around with different equipment and what have you. Certainly driving in the car, it's got to be the easiest thing to do. The least distracting, I think, as well. Not having to play around with different technology and whatever, just turn it on and there it is. So it is encouraging. We keep hearing the death knell of radio. It's going away. It's old-fashioned. It doesn't work anymore. We have new things. These numbers, I think, I kind of wonder how those people react when they read these numbers. Like, I guess it's not what we thought it was. Yeah. It's marketing. Trying to market people to the new toys and get them to pay for different services and that sort of thing. When you can just turn on your radio for free and listen. It's still the easiest way to do it. We're thankful that there's a lot of people out there still listening to radio, that's for sure.
Yep. Some breaking news coming out of the United States. A fellow radio friend and a great guy that has the Dave's Receiver page, Dave Zantow, N9EWO, has passed away, we have learned on Saturday. So the obituary says David William Zantow, age 66, of Janesville, Wisconsin, passed away on December 6, 2023, at Select Specialty Hospital, Madison, the result of injuries suffered in an auto-pedestrian accident. He was born in Janesville on November 8, 1957, the son of Diehl and Joanne Zantow. The family moved to Beloit, and David graduated from the Beloit Memorial High School in 1975. After returning to Janesville, David was employed at Radio Shack until it closed. He was an avid ham radio operator. He will be remembered for being very talented at electronics and computer repair. And I was personally in contact with Dave so many times over the past years as we were actually comparing radio reviews, radio information. He would always comment on my reviews. And he has excellent information on his webpage that we'll share on the link. And we give our condolences to family and friends, and he will truly be missed. So there's upcoming ham radio contests.
2 of them coming up for next weekend. First is the DX RTTY Contest, organized by the Czech Radio Club, 0000 to 2359 Zulu, December the 16th. It is bands 10 through 80 meters. It's a radio teletype contest.
And there's the Croatian CW Contest, 1400 Zulu, December 16th to 1400 Zulu, December 17th. It's organized by the Croatian Amateur Radio Association. The bands are 1.8, 3.5, 7, 14, 21, and 28 megahertz. And it's Morse code, CW only.
I'd like to take one quick minute to send our condolences to a good friend of ours, John Fischer, down in Massachusetts, regular listener to the program. His mother, unfortunately, passed away after a short illness. And it's a tough time of the year for something like that to happen, for sure. So we're thinking about John, and we send our condolences to him and all of his family and friends.
Yep, please take care of yourself. And we are out of time.
That will do it for us today. We thank you for tuning in. We're getting closer to the holiday period. Probably starting next week, we'll have some holiday programming previews for you. We know of a couple things coming up already that we'll be telling you about on shortwave. And we're just keeping our eyes and ears open for some other notices that'll be coming out in the next week or so. So check us out again next week here on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in the city of Montreal.
Bye-bye.
Tu Polskie Radio Warszawa. Polskie
Polskie Radio Warszawa nadaje audycję w języku niemieckim.